How are you, man? Can we, talk about this bonus situation? Think about that, my friends. But in the meantime, welcome to another episode of the Top 10 Favorite and from what I believe are the best performances by some of the greatest actors in cinematic history. Yeah, that's right. I'm the lieutenant and I'm in charge here. I'm starting from 10 and then running my way up to number 1. And always remember, folks, I have seen every film that is attainable, keyword attainable, of these artists. So all of these lists come from true, passionate, and hard-biting accuracy. Ladies and gentlemen, it is Black History Month, and I am so excited to be talking about one of my favorite artists on this channel. He is one true treasure of an artist. Now, when we talk about iconic Black male actors, of course, we talk about Denzel Washington, James Earl Jones, Sidney Poitier, Paul Robeson, Ossie Davis, I hope, even Will Smith, and dozens more. But hardly ever do I hear anybody talk about this amazing, brilliant, intense, and in my eyes, iconic actor that deserves to be on that list. His name is Yaphet Kotto. Born as Frederick Samuel Kotto in the Bronx, New York, he grew up in a Jewish family, later changing his name to Yaphet, which in Hebrew means beautiful. His parents divorced when he was 3 years old, so he was raised by his maternal grandparents, and at an early age, he was already inspired by the arts. He has claimed after walking down the street one day in New York, he saw a poster for On the Waterfront outside a movie theater. He went in, bought a ticket, and was inspired instantly by Brando's commanding performance to study acting. And then after seeing Sidney Poitier on screen, that inspired him even more. Inspired him so much that he was admitted and became a member of the famed Actors Studio in the late 1950s, progressing to major Broadway productions, notably The Zulu and the Zeta, The Blood Knot by Athol Fugard, and The Great White Hope, understudying the amazing James Earl Jones. And quite often, he would understudy him, I might add. God, how I wish I could have seen him on stage, because audiences alike praised his raw and real power that this man possessed when he sunk himself into a character. With his theatrical training, it wasn't long until Hollywood would come around knocking. Even Barbara Stanwyck became a huge mentor and influence within his life. Yaphet Kotto, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the most underrated actors in cinema, period. Every film he has done, no matter how ridiculous it may be, and oh my God, he has done a fair share of horrible films. Let's not be so coy about this. But his performance is always gripping. You must know by now, I don't do TV appearances because, my Lord, how does anybody have that much time for streaming these days? However, I would be remiss if I did not mention his amazing performance as Senior Detective Al Giardello on one of the greatest crime shows on television ever, Homicide: Life on the Street. This show is truly incredible. If you haven't seen any of it, I highly recommend it, even though Kotto said he didn't really enjoy his time on the show, because he claimed his character was constantly being underwritten, and he wanted to give Giardello more meat to his character, which pushed Kotto to write a few episodes, which are outstanding. I say this every time, folks, but this top 10 was indeed extremely difficult because of how many captivating performances Kotto has given for 50 plus years in the industry, which goes to show the stamina of this rock star here. He inspires me to be a better actor and commit to characters, always with strength, vulnerability, and balls that every character deserves. And so here we go. It's showtime. Get ready as we talk about the top 10 best performances of the epic badass himself, Yaphet Kotto. Starting off at number 10, we have Brubaker, an Academy Award-nominated film for its adapted screenplay, which came out in 1980, starring everyone's favorite hunky icon, Robert Redford, as the title character, Henry Brubaker, a new inmate of a small prison farm in Arkansas who's extremely observant. But wait a minute, he's actually the brand new warden of this prison. Holy shnikes. and he plans to turn this prison around, cleaning it from its horrible corruption and mistreatment of the prisoners. Yaphet Kotto plays one of the inmates, Dickie Coombs, who is then recruited by Brubaker to be his right-hand man in fixing the prison from the inside out. And wouldn't you know it, they keep having issues with the government. This was based on the book Accomplices to the Crime, the Arkansas Prison Scandal, which was based on the real-life efforts of prison administrator Thomas O. Merton. This film is entertaining enough, especially when you have Redford and Kotto working together. And you have gems like Jane Alexander, Murray Hamilton, Everett McGill, God I love you man, and hey, Morgan Freeman. Kotto literally steals every scene he is in with the quiet intensity that he just inhabits, and the explosive scene after Abraham's death where he throws the table, grabs a pool cue, breaks it in half, kicks a chair, and just counters Tim McIntyre in that scene is just so damn great. This is just one of many explosions that Yaphet was so great at giving that elevates the drama to such great heights. Just like that clap that Yaphet gives at the very end, that's to you, man. That clap is definitely to you. Number 9, The Liberation of L.B. Jones. A very interesting picture, and the final film directed by the legendary Oscar winner himself, William Wyler. Based on the book by Jesse Hill Ford, it tells the story of Lord Byron Jones, the richest black man in his county of Humboldt, Tennessee, who files for a divorce against his much younger wife, played thrillingly by Lola Falana, for having an affair with a white policeman, played amazingly by Anthony Zerbe. But this absolutely could cause a whole ruckus in this part of the South. So what is to happen? Kotto, in the role of Sonny Boy Mosby, has such a brooding intensity here that, honest to God, reminds me so much of James Dean and Brando and Montgomery Clift. The whole opening sequence of him arriving in town, Anthony Zerbe profiling him. You know where you're going, boy? Kotto is just looking down, lightly chuckling. Yeah, I know where I'm going. He has such a swagger and a wall about him that exudes mystery and intrigue, which makes Yaphet Kotto's performance quite honestly the anchor of this whole film. Jesus Christ, when it gets to that tractor scene between Kotto and Arch Johnson, it is so chilling because all that transpired up to this moment has been so tragic and brutal, and now we have Sonny pushing the abusive Bumpus into the blades of the tractor, where it can be clearly confirmed as an accident, and being such a shocking moment in film history, as honestly one of the first deaths of a white man done at the hand of a black man on film. Kotto was given direction by the producers to have remorse on his face for killing this guy, but Kotto knew in this moment he had to have no remorse. He had to be stone cold, which makes it both chilling and yet rewarding. By the time of the ending, we see that sense of remorse and yet maturity. It's a beautifully nuanced performance that I honestly wish could be much higher. Number 8, Across 110th Street. Man, I tell you guys, I really wish this one was much, much higher. You're going to hear me say that more and more, I'm sure, because Yaphet Kotto as Lieutenant William Pope was again one captivating motherfucker. He and Captain Frank Mattelli, played by co-producer and 2-time Oscar winner Anthony Quinn, are at odds with each other. Pope being very much by the book, and Mattelli, a rogue and crooked cop that still gets shit done. But they have to fight each other along the way of solving the murder of 2 cops and 5 of the gangsters. This film really is quite far from being one of the soul films of the 70s, even though it has a killer soundtrack featuring Bobby Womack's title song, which, yes, is a different arrangement than what most people remember made famous again in Tarantino's Jackie Brown. But this film, as a matter of fact, really is the likes of a neo-noir, taking more elements from In the Heat of the Night, indeed. Funny enough, Quinn wanted Sidney Poitier to play the role of Lieutenant Pope, but people protested saying Poitier wasn't urban enough to play this role. So Kotto was indeed the right man for the job, because Kotto is just grounded and real. Number 7, Truck Turner. A damn good soul film, which was also known as Black Bullet at one point. It stars the coolest cat of them all, Isaac Hayes, hot from his amazing soundtrack from Shaft, who plays the bounty hunter himself, Truck Turner, who tracks down Gator, a no-good pimp, but Gator gets himself killed, which sends his woman Dorinda, played thrillingly by Nichelle Nichols, after boldly going where no man has gone before. Well, she is quite the opposite of Uhura here, hiring a bad motherfucker to take Truck Turner out, and that man is Harvard Blue, played with such excellence and chilling viciousness by Kotto. Just his introduction at the funeral for Gator is nothing short of epic B-movie filmmaking. Everyone paying their respects for Gator, but then we see this limo pull up, and out saunters this beautiful-looking being with his white coat. And he takes one look at Nichelle, looks at Gator in the coffin, and spits right in his dead face. Kotto again has this charm about him as Blue, that we're constantly entranced by how he moves, how he talks, and how much power he wants to take. I guess I'll spoil it for you, my friends, because I just gotta talk about it. The finale for Kotto in the hospital, the chase between he and Isaac Hayes, is so exciting and tense because Kotto takes a kid as a hostage, and Hayes gets him with a few more shots in the back. But Kotto doesn't just go down. He fights with every bit of life he has left to escape. That whole sequence of Kotto getting back up, tripping over himself, pushing himself to make it to his car, is so Shakespearean. The extreme handheld close-up on Kotto as his face is just numb, zombified. And as he's dying on the way to the car as Hayes is following him, with no score in the background, is just a grand opera of a death that only Kotto can make it so satisfying and sweet. Kudos has to go to director Jonathan Kaplan as well for that, but Kotto, man, he knows how to make a small script like this better than what it is, even though he only took this role for the money to pay for a divorce he was going through at the time. But that's beside the point. Number 6, Live and Let Die. Ba-doom, boom, boom. Yes, the iconic James Bond classic, which was the first for Roger Moore as 007 himself. And fun fact, the first Roger Moore Bond film I ever saw. And another iconic first was Yaphet Kotto was the very first main black villain in a Bond film. And to this day, at 33 years old at the time of filming, he remains the youngest Bond villain. Kotto plays Dr. Kananga, a very respectful diplomat, but also he plays Mr. Big, who self-produces heroin and murders a couple of agents. Just another day in Ian Fleming's world. But of course, Bond is traveling down to Nolans to save the day. I actually really like this Bond film. It's not my favorite by any means, not even my favorite Roger Moore Bond film. But what I absolutely love about it is its amazing Oscar-nominated theme song. Thanks, Paul and Linda. I can't stand the Guns N' Roses cover. But I digress. The tarot and voodoo sequences are just thrilling. Jeffrey Holder is frighteningly great. But most of all, of course, Yaphet Kotto is just brilliant as Mr. Big. But once again, this was still not too much of a fun time for Kotto, since he was battling a silly script. And well, this is the Roger Moore Bond series. It won't be the end of that silliness. But still, Kotto gives Mr. Big much more depth and reality than what's on the page. The way he stares at you, the way he cuts off Bond's famous line, "The names are for tombstones, baby. Take the honky out and waste him." He's just as electrifying in every scene he is in here. And the knife fight is great. Until, spoiler alert, Yaphet Kotto's ridiculous death scene inflating up like a damn balloon and popping is without a doubt one of the stupidest deaths in all of the Bond films I have ever seen. And side note, no blood? No guts? When his whole body bobs into pieces? Come on, man. The film was obviously a big hit, but Kotto was told by the producers not to come to the premiere, fearing that either white audiences wouldn't be ready for a black Bond villain, and or fearing black audiences would be angry, having not just one Bond villain being black who's stereotypically dealing drugs, but multiple black villains in this, which is just, it's wild. But all in all, Kotto is nonetheless extraordinary in this, bringing exciting pathos to a classic Bond villain. Number 5, Midnight Run. You're damn right this is in the top 5, and I am so sorry it is not even higher, because it absolutely deserves to be. As a film, ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the greatest comedies of all time, and agreed by another critic who praised this film as quote-unquote the Casablanca of buddy comedies. This stars Robert De Niro in one of his greatest performances ever as bounty hunter Jack Walsh, who has to track down a mafia accountant, Jonathan Mardukas, aka the Duke, played brilliantly by Charles Grodin, and bring him back from New York to LA ASAP, until Jack finds out he has another bounty hunter, the Mafia, and the FBI tracking him to grab the Duke as well. The whole ensemble is hysterically phenomenal, with Yaphet Kotto rounding out the cast as FBI agent Alonzo Mosley, leading the expedition to get Walsh and the Duke. From the very first frame we are introduced to Mosley, we are captivated, as usual. He and De Niro together in every scene is just comic gold, mainly because Kotto plays it so damn straight and seriously that it's even funnier. This movie is so damn genius that unfortunately, it was the most difficult shoot Kotto ever did, mainly because he and director Marty Brest didn't get along. Marty Brest apparently went to the Warren Beatty School of Directing and did nonstop take after take, even after they got the shot that works in the scene. But he always wanted to try something different, which as an actor myself, I don't mind, because hey, what else can we do in this scene to make it better? But if it's beaten to death, then yeah, it doesn't become fun anymore. So you can say that aggravation and menace Kotto felt really fed into the character of Mosley really well, on top of the fact that Kotto was suffering from a fever throughout filming. Even though Kotto and the whole film went through a hellacious production, Kotto shines amazingly, and I swear to God, nothing beats that sequence in the boxcar. Where's Jack Walsh? Well, he and the other guy got off already, 2 or 3 stops ago. His real name's Mosley. Bye, Mosley. It is just pitch perfect. Midnight Run. Guys, if you have not seen it, please, oh please, I beg you, you will not regret it. Number 4, Raid on Entebbe. Oh my God, one of the greatest rescue mission movies I have ever seen, based on the true story of the real-life mission Operation Thunderbolt, or called Operation Entebbe, where 246 passengers were hijacked on a French airliner in Tel Aviv by Palestinian terrorists, and then transported to the Entebbe airport in Uganda and held hostage. Directed by Irvin Kershner, the same director behind one of the greatest films and certainly one of the greatest sequels of all time, Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. This made-for-television film is seriously gripping from the very beginning, with an all-star cast including Peter Finch, Jack Warden, Charles Bronson, Martin Balsam, Sylvia Sidney, and of course, Yaphet Kotto in an Emmy-nominated performance for Best Supporting Actor as President Idi Amin. Yaphet Kotto is so silently intense as the president of Uganda. Kotto didn't want to do this role because of his Jewish heritage and felt it would be too painful and controversial to take on this role, causing more issues with the state of Israel as well. But after NBC kept hounding him, he finally agreed to it, and thank God he did, because he steals every scene he is in that I demanded more scenes with him. I love the moment where he comes back to give this little warning to the hostages right before he leaves again. It's basically, oh yeah, remember, please be very careful, because the Palestinians have activated explosives all around this building. Shalom. Yeah, it's like, okay, bye. Jeez Louise. Kotto just adds that silent but deadly action of a psychopath coming to your enemies with smiles, that it really is so breathtaking. Number 3, Bone. One hell of a crazy art film. Written and directed by first-time director at the time, Larry Cohen, whom Yaphet Kotto referred to as the white Martin Luther King of the movies. Interesting. Once Cohen saw Kotto's performance in The Liberation of L.B. Jones, he knew he had his bone. Bone breaks into this rich white couple's home in Beverly Hills, but they mistaken him for the exterminator when they find a rat in the pool. However, Bone makes it clear he's clearing them out, taking all the cash they got. But then he realizes they're not as wealthy as they appear to be. He sends the husband to the bank to withdraw money, or else he will rape and kill his wife. As a film itself, it is without a doubt insane, cutting edge, and actually quite hilarious. It really does an effective job of capturing the theme of prejudice and the sexual underbelly of racism, as put by Cohen himself, but it is totally meant to be a satiric black comedy. Yaphet Kotto as Bone is unbelievably iconic for film buffs of the 1970s. Kotto is so menacing and incredibly hysterical at the same time. This film absolutely is very significant because Kotto never really had a lot of leading man roles, sadly. So to see him take the poster front and center is such a joy. Producers had no idea how to market this film because they certainly didn't get the satire. So they marketed it as a new title, Housewife, or in London they advertised it as Dial Rat for terror. I mean, come on, really? But regardless, any loving audience of B movies will love this film. It's not for everyone, but anybody will love the work of Yaphet here. As proclaimed by Yaphet himself, he believed his performance as Bone here was the best he ever gave in his whole career. Number 2, Blue Collar. Yes, brothers and sisters, in my opinion, it's one of the greatest films in the history of cinema, period. And Kotto's performance here as Smokey truly rivals the number 1 spot. It's almost neck and neck. Co-written and directed by Paul Schrader in his directorial debut, we are taken to this motor factory, Checker Motors in Detroit, in the heat of 1977. We have friends and co-workers Zeke, Jerry, and Smokey, played by Richard Pryor, Harvey Keitel, and Yaphet Kotto respectively, trying to make it through life with the day-to-day sweat equity they give working under the union. As times get more and more challenging, these three devise a plan to rob from the union and take what is quote-unquote rightfully theirs. But will it work out for them and their families? I'm not understating this at all, ladies and gentlemen. Yaphet Kotto gives one of the greatest performances in this film that solidifies why he was one of the most iconic figures of 1970s film. Every scene between he, Pryor, and Keitel just sizzles with hard-bitten, grease-covered, beer-soaked magic. Even though, famously, these three actors hated each other while making this film, so much that it led to verbal abuse and actual fistfights. Pryor was back on his cocaine addiction during this time as well, and it got worse when he even threatened Schrader with a gun, saying he's not going to do more than 3 takes per scene. With all the intensifying and horrendous situations Schrader had to deal with, being a first-time director here, he turned in one hell of an immersive piece of storytelling, just from the opening credits sequence of The Factory Work, with Jack Nietzsche's and Captain Beefheart's Hard Working Man musical score pounding through the credits is just freaking amazing. It is like Nietzsche and Captain Beefheart composed this music with hammers and welders. You smell the grinding of the metal, the grease, the paint. It's so damn immersive, you can't look away. As we grow and understand these characters, we really see their imperfections, the vulnerability, and the courage these men have living under hard times. Of course, it is not an epic Yaphet Kotto performance unless you have Kotto waiting in silent darkness with a frickin' baseball bat interrogating union agents. God, Yaphet Kotto was such a badass! I just love every single scene, especially the scene where Kotto gives the heart of the film's message. And spoiler alert, sorry guys, once again, his death scene in the paint room, as scientifically implausible as it is Shakespearean again, and really hard to watch because of how much Kotto takes his time with this scene, that it isn't overdone at all. I am gripping the life of my chair every single time Kotto is fighting his way to shut everything off and get the hell out of that room that's been locked up. Guys, if you have not seen Blue Collar, I implore you all again, see it and own it because it still holds up as a mirror to nature today, thanks primarily to the performances, the writing, but most notably, Kotto. And now, my friends, here are some honorable mentions. The Running Man. Hell yes, the Arnold Schwarzenegger classic that apparently is set only 3 years ago. And side note, one of my favorites from Arnold. And if you don't think so, well, to hell with you. I honestly believe this film was the very first movie I ever remember seeing Yaphet Kotto in, and I love every minute of it. He's Arnold's right-hand man in their escape from prison. And when they work together in The Running Man, they kick some serious ass together. And who better to bring such gravitas to this campy movie than Kotto? I mean, again, his death scene is really beautifully done. I don't want to be the only asshole in heaven. It's so great. A House Divided, Denmark VC's Rebellion. A very important work which premiered on PBS as a made-for-television film in 1982. Based on the true story of Denmark Vesey, a free black man in the early 19th century who led a planned revolt for slaves against their masters in Charleston, South Carolina. But sadly, before it was even executed, the slave owners found out and arrested, then hung Vesey and his cohorts for starting the revolt. This revolt was historically huge because it was one of the major steps in the uprising for slaves, which took place in 1822. It would only be 9 years later where the powerful rebellion led by Nat Turner would occur. Yaphet Kotto plays the man himself, Denmark Vesey, with such quiet confidence that we never see such an urgent vendetta from him as Vesey. And some had issues with that, but I think it works just brilliantly because at the same time, you have the slaves that Vesey befriends defending their white masters because they feel that they treat them well. The white masters and Denmark Vesey are almost seen to have the same demeanor, which creates such conflict for the slaves. It gives Denmark such power and capable leadership for the slaves to stand up and fight for their true freedom. The whole cast is wonderful, with Mary Alice playing Denmark's wife, Cleavon Little, Ned Beatty, and if you see the original versions, you have an intro from the amazing actor and fellow cast member Brock Peters, and a post-film discussion from professors Dr. Armstead L. Robinson of the University of Virginia and Dr. Nathan L. Huggins of Harvard, sharing the importance of human dignity and freedom. Yaphet Kotto even co-produced this work himself, which is very honorable and quite effective. Friday Foster. Oh, another Soul cinematic classic, based on the classic comic book character of the same name, starring the gorgeous and badass Pam Grier as the slick photographer herself, who was an eyewitness of the assassination attempt on billionaire Blake Terra, and she is led into a deep political conspiracy that could get her killed. So she can't do this alone. She needs the help of private detective Colt Hawkins, played by none other than Kotto. The chemistry between Kotto and Grier is so fantastic and so funny. Kotto and Grier really get to shine with their comedic chops as well as the dramatic. But of course, this can't be a fun film without some action. You know, Kotto being the shit out of Carl Weathers and then later beating the shit out of Jason Bernard with such classic lines like, "What you need is an education. 2 and 2 are 4. Boom. It's so classic. Report to the Commissioner, which is honestly an underrated gem of a New York crime film of the 1970s. Based on the book by James Mills, the same writer of another book, which was also adapted into one of the greatest films ever, The Panic in Needle Park, this film is the intricate and complex plot of a female undercover cop played by Susan Blakely, and she goes missing, while a new recruit, Bo, played by Michael Moriarty, has to go undercover to find her. It's so exciting, and Yaphet Kotto plays Detective Richard Blackstone, aka Crunch, who helps Moriarty through the operation, even though he knows he can't handle the beat. The standout scenes, of course, are the elevator standoff, or elevator sit-off, because they're sitting down the whole time with guns facing each other. It's so amazing. It's such a fantastic sequence that not a lot of people talk about. But then we have Kotto's speech in the cell with Bo, how he knows Bo wasn't meant for this job. He knew right when he walked into the precinct that he was going to end up in that cell. It is such an understated performance that gives me chills every single time. Othello. Yes, that's right, an actual Shakespeare classic starring Kotto as the tragic Moor himself. This is quite a story, ladies and gentlemen. As you see on IMDb, there was a film adaptation of Othello under Yaphet Kotto's resume, right? Which was supposedly released in 1980, right? And there might be some of you out there that say that this film doesn't really exist. And to be honest, folks, yeah, you're right. It doesn't exist on VHS or DVD, but it does exist on a 4-reeler, which I have tracked down and watched with my own 2 eyes. The one that really doesn't exist is Kotto's own directorial debut and starring role in The Limit. This was only made on a 35mm film, which its whereabouts remain unknown. But back to Othello. What is known is Yaphet Kotto's groundbreaking performance as the tragic Moor, making Kotto the very first black actor to portray Othello on film. Many will say Lawrence Fishburne was the first with the adaptation in 1995, and while that had a much wider release, sure, but technically 30 years before that adaptation, the world should have been blessed with Yaphet Kotto's powerful portrayal as Othello. The film adaptation actually came from a stage production at Martha's Vineyard, starring Kotto, of course, as Othello. The director, Liz White, then wanted to make it a film, and thus began a Shakespearean adaptation with an all-black cast, 4 years in the making. Literally, since Kotto was building up his star power and working on television in the 60s, they had to make this film throughout 4 years from 1962 to 1966. Now, the film itself, ladies and gentlemen, to say the film is as psychedelically 60s as it gets is an understatement. And that's all I'll say about that, which makes Yaphet Kotto's brilliant portrayal as Othello clearly the standout, because we see Kotto reaching for the heavens on the false lie he has been fed by Iago. We see the pain and the wretchedness he descends to so beautifully through just movement. It's truly dazzling. By the time we arrive to the finale, oh my God, just his movement breaks your heart. So ladies and gentlemen, if you have the interest to catch this piece of dazzling work from Kotto, I say your eyes won't regret it, because you are seeing the first black actor to ever portray Othello on film. Number 1, Alien. I couldn't deny it, folks. I just couldn't. This Oscar-winning gothic horror classic from 1979, helmed by Ridley Scott, features Yaphet Kotto's arguably most definitive and iconic performance on film. Everyone must know the story of this film, correct? And if you don't, God, where have you been, my friend? It is only one of the greatest horror films ever made, which, after just recently rewatching it myself, guys, it still scares the holy bejesus out of me. It is incredibly smart having our whole ensemble here play truckers in space, with Yaphet Kotto representing the relatable, down-to-earth, blue-collar mindset. Parker here is one of the guys we really relate to, especially when he rejects the idea of landing by a derelict, abandoned ship, since they are not a rescue ship. And can we really talk about this bonus situation, man? Fast forward to Kane waking up after the facehugger died off, hungry as an ox, and we have that naturalistic dinner scene, which is so amazing and so terrifying with how it escalates. I just love how Parker is the one who's ready to attack with a knife after the chest burster, and after the loss of more and more crew members, Parker transforms into the ultimate hunter, going to full beast mode, which obviously affects the natural order that Ellen Ripley has to keep. Amazingly enough, Yaphet Kotto and Sigourney Weaver certainly had some friction while filming, mainly because Kotto didn't feel Weaver was up to the task, so to speak, and not really giving enough to the scenes. Kotto kept pushing her and kept pushing her until he felt he got some power from her, saying that she was the new captain of the ship. intense as that may have been, it still worked, especially since the actors really had to direct themselves sometimes. Ridley Scott already had too much to worry about with the cinematography, the framing, the production design, and he certainly didn't have time to change the fact that Parker doesn't die in the film. That was another issue where Kotto kept rallying the idea of his character not dying. So Ridley purposely tried to avoid any contact with Kotto leading up to that scene. He's the biggest badass in space, man. Ain't no way this 7+ foot creature was going to take him out. Thankfully, though, after enough convincing, Kotto agreed to have his character die. But what is most important, Parker doesn't just go down without a fight. I can remember that whole sequence of him trying to save Lambert's life, and the xenomorph pins him down, and just that image of Parker screaming his life out. It had such an effect on me. As a kid, Kotto gives an image of fighting back as hard as you can, with every piece of yourself, to this threat. And to me, that seals the courage and the strength that Kotto gave to every character he's played. That's what's important in building a character, right? Strength, confidence, even if they're such fragile human beings. Strength can be played on opposite spectrums all the time. And Yaphet Kotto gave such a body of work that exemplifies that principle in dramatic art. I'm sure you've noticed that Kotto practically had issues working on so many, if not majority, of his films because he felt strongly about the same wishes all artists have about their work. They want it to be real. They want it to mean something. And he has blessed the world with the acts of commitment and servitude that made us love him. He obviously was not perfect. Of course, he has made mistakes, such as turning down the roles of Lando Calrissian of Empire Strikes Back. But the big one, turning down Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Enterprise in Star Trek The Next Generation. And oh God, how I would have loved to have seen him as Picard, or even Sisko in Deep Space Nine. But you know what, folks? He definitely had his fair share of space, right? He has often claimed he was the great-great-grandson of King Alexander Bell, the ruler of the Douala region of Cameroon in the late 19th century, which is just wild. But it explains how every performance given by Kotto just has that strong, vibrant power of royalty behind them, but also such a spiritual poise, which also explains his own autobiography entitled The Royalty, A Spiritual Awakening. He has deeply inspired me with all of his performances, and I only hope that everyone will continue to let his spirit shine on for generations. Shalom, my friends. Now, I want some answers. Do you agree with my picks? What are your favorite performances by this incredible force of nature? I know there's too many to count. Please share in the comments below, and if you haven't already, folks, please subscribe. It doesn't hurt a soul. If you like this, please click like, ring that bell to stay updated on more content to come this month, and unlike Ben Richards, who doesn't do requests, I do take requests, which you can list in the comments as well. And as always, my friends, thank you so very much for watching. And now, folks, can we finally talk about this bonus situation?